Michael, you got your JD in law from the University of Detroit. Afterwards, you go on to work at a law firm and then you start your own in 1995. But in 2006, you became an adjunct professor at your old university teaching law practice management. So, what drew you to teach during that period?
They called me. They were in need of a professor to teach someone to teach the students how to run a law firm. They saw what I was doing. They saw my success. And I said yes, and I tried it for a few years. It was fun going back to the old school and meeting some students, and I got some really great feedback. And I only did it for a few years, but it was great.
Nice. So did they give you kind of the topic? They said, "Hey, you're going to do law practice management."
Yeah, that was kind of what else? I wasn't going to teach contract law or torts. I mean, I could teach torts, I guess, or property is what I was going to say. But yeah, how to run a law firm. I think, that's another reason why I wrote the book that I wrote was to teach law students and lawyers how to run a practice. So that was actually my first foray into really teaching. And when we wrote the book, it was to teach more. And in a funny side note, Chris, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but when my publisher said, what's a goal for this book? Like if in 10 years, what's one thing that you wish or hope that happens? And it was that every law student, this is a mandatory book for them to read. And it hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it ever will, but I really wish somebody in law school would have given me this book, or soon after law school would have given me the book, Fireproof, because it just would have taken away so much guesswork from what I had to go through. So anyway, that's that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I hear a lot of our guests, they talk about, you go to law school to learn how to practice law, but they don't teach you how to run a business, which is what a law firm really is.
It's almost becoming cliche that what they don't teach you in law school. And they really don't teach you how to market, how to advertise, how to run a business, how to hire and fire, how to look at data. They don't even mention data. I mean, you need almost a year of an MBA or a year of something else to accompany it, unless you're going to just work for somebody and work at somebody else's law firm where they have the grief. But if you ever want to, run your own place, hang your own shingle, you definitely need, this knowledge.
Absolutely. And we had John Nachazel on previously, your COO, your integrator. And, he's very the process, the get down and dirty with the data and things like that. And you're mostly an ideas guy who basically you're innovating, you're trying new things. So what elements do you think make a visionary and not just someone with a few good ideas?
So a visionary is someone who has, 100 ideas a day. And that has been me my entire life. And I just, I never knew what to do with them. Most of them didn't come true because I didn't have my John Nachazel. And, a visionary's mind is just running. A visionary doesn't want to read the nitty gritty contracts. A visionary can't read an email more than a few sentences. A visionary, I can go on and tell you about all my flaws, but a true visionary it's an entrepreneur, and it's 1% of the population or less. They're few and far between, but it's really, really important to identify and know yourself and know if you're that visionary, because it'll change your life. For the first 13 years of running my law practice, before I met Gino Wickman, I did not know I was a visionary. I had never heard that term. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. Maybe if we would have had a conversation, I could have figured it out, but I didn't really know. And once he, drew out the definition and made me understand what a visionary was and what an integrator was, I realized clearly where my lane was and what I wasn't good at. And I was still doing the integrator stuff. I was doing both. 99% of the lawyers are doing both, right? And in my practice and my business didn't explode until I understood the difference and I started acting in my lane. And then I hired John to act in his lane as the integrator. So neither one is more important than the other, which is really, really important, Chris. Neither one it's just what are you? You one or the other, you can't be both and do it really well. So that's really the importance of that discussion, in my opinion. And for every lawyer, it's important to know which one they are.
I couldn't agree more, Michael. And one thing that I'll say, when I did read your book and it was phenomenal. And one thing that triggered me is, for our business, we had self-implemented EOS. And I thought, we're working maybe at 80%, EOS and traction. So we went out and hired a certified EOS implementer, and it was really a game changer to have that non-biased third party to kind of chair the meetings. And in your book, you talk about advocating for finding people who can compensate on your own weaknesses and where it might be someone else's strengths. So is there a method or exercise owners can use to help them identify what their strengths and weaknesses are?
Well, of course. Yeah. So we spent a lot of time in the book talking about different type of tests, whether they're psychological based tests or just memory tests or otherwise. I mean, I've used them for well more than 13 years before I met Gino. My father-in-law was a big proponent of it. When I was married, my wife and I took the tests, and this is 20 plus years ago. And they're really illuminating, and it's shocking how 50 questions or 75 questions can really dial in and tell you who you are. But you won't know that until you take it yourself. So I highly recommend everybody do them themselves. And I've done them all. I've done the Colbys and the discs and the Enneagrams and the Wonderlicks and the, all of them, the preview. And once you read the test the data that comes out of it, you'll realize, wow, that's me. How do those innocuous questions about, weird stuff, how do they get to know deep inside my heart, deep inside my brain? And it's really a fascinating thing. And then you realize, how could I ever hire another person without giving them this test? Because the questions are innocuous. I don't have a better word for that than that. Maybe you do. But you give people the test and you can read about them. And you can't really, the tests are so smart that you can't scam them. You can't fake them out. If you lie, they know, because they ask it in so many different ways, and most people aren't smart enough to cheat them. And so what you're left with is a great summary of who the person is. So we make sure that every potential employee takes the test, from the mailroom to the senior executive, every lawyer, secretary, and everybody in between. And we read them before the interviews, and we ask questions off of them. And it's just another tool in our arsenal to make sure that we're not making a hiring decision, because hiring decisions are costly, they're exhaustive, exhausting, and they're anything that I can do to avoid it, I do. And the test costs a lot of money. I don't even know what we pay per person. I mean, it's thousands of dollars, but right, in my opinion, it's the best money we spend. And I'm a huge advocate for it.
Michael, that was kind of going to be my follow-up question to that, because I've taken some of those myself. I haven't taken near as many as you, of course. And DISC makes me think that you're like a DI, if I had to guess, somewhere in that range. Who knows? I might be way off. But
look it up. I'm not a great I don't have a memory for that stuff.
Yep.
I read it, I absorb it, and I kind of flush it out of my brain. So we'll have a conversation offline.
Okay. Yeah, that might be fun. So the cost concern here, obviously one of the biggest costs for a business is keeping your people, the cost of turnover and hiring. And so I was really curious, if a firm wants to implement this, at what phase do you recommend implementing the personality test? Is it right when you get the resume, you go through them and then boom, you hit a personality test? Or is it after maybe a quick hitter interview, just to make sure they're that 15-minute first interview, just to make sure they meet the qualifications? Or at what point do you implement it?
So actually, I thought where you were going, Chris, was, how big of a firm do you need in order to do testing? And I want to answer that question because you probably have a lot of solos listening. My first hire took a test. So, and it's weird. I've never talked about this on a podcast or webinar, but that's the truth, and it's interesting, right? I mean, it's interesting for a lot of reasons, but we don't have to go into all that. So it doesn't matter the size of your firm, you should test. When I was smaller, I would definitely interview somebody first, and if I liked them, I'd go through the expense, right? As I now have 150 employees in a full HR department, they are doing tests before the interviews. We have it dialed in. I mean, we have packages that we pay for. So we pay a yearly fee and we get unlimited tests for a lot of these things because we're doing dozens and dozens and dozens a year. For the solo who has to pay per test, you got to make a business decision. But, it's not bad to interview somebody, but the interviews, I've been faked out in interviews. I've had bad experience. I've been faked out. I've had people pull the wool over my eyes and they come in and they suck and they don't, all the stuff they represented was bullshit. So, it's very hard to bullshit on these tests. And I won't exaggerate this answer too much. It's so important though, in my opinion, the single best thing you can do, better than even interviewing. I'd rather do testing and not interview. If you want the truth, I'd rather, truly you're not going to do that. But because the interview is important. And if people won't test, by the way, Chris, I won't hire them. If they say, you know what, here are my grades, here's my track record, I'm not taking your goddamn tests, I don't hire them.
Yeah. And I'm sure they don't take the test. They don't fit with your values anyway. So boom, they're gone.
What are they afraid of? If they're afraid of me looking inside of them to know who they truly are, that's not a person who would fit our culture.
That makes sense. That makes great sense. So in your book, the goal of Fireproof, the philosophy is running your law firm like a business so you can focus on doing what you do best. And so just kind of a broad question here, what's the main thing lawyers tend to do wrong when they start their own practice? What do you think they should prioritize and focus on when they begin to go out on their own?
It's a great question. I've never been asked that. So I guess I will say, if you mentioned the book Fireproof, and chapter 1, know thyself, right? If you know who you are early on, if you know if you're the visionary type or the integrator type, you will be able to, focus on that stuff early, as opposed to 13 years later when I finally couldn't, I was hitting the ceiling and I couldn't move on and grow. So it took me 13 years to understand that concept. I would have loved to have had that concept on day one. Even if I had to be the integrator and visionary for a short period of time, it wouldn't have been 13 years, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would have liked to have known earlier on, who I was. And so if you're going to hang up a shingle, I would, okay, I can't afford an integrator right now, but I know I'm not going to do that for long. And my next hire is going to have the attributes and the characteristics of the things that I don't love to do and I'm not great at. I didn't do that for 13 years. And I think my trajectory would have been different had I known that. So that's the thing that hops out at me in my brain when you ask that question. Know thyself.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I was listening to a Bigger Pockets podcast. I'm not sure if you listened to that before. It's a real estate podcast, and they had Dan Sullivan on, and it said focus on who, not how. Like who should be doing this task. And when you know yourself, then you can maybe go out, hire a project manager if you can't afford necessarily the full integrator, the full package of process guy.
Yeah, interesting.
I got a couple questions that I'm going to throw at you here that are probably going to be unique too. So, since the book has been out since June, are there any additional chapters that you wish you'd added or would like to add now?
Wow. Well, a couple of people have suggested that I have a follow-up. One was on branding, personal branding. And, that they think that I have a decent personal brand and that I manage it well, and that I could do a whole book. It was a podcast, and we went off on a branding tangent, and he liked what I had to say. And he said, "That's your next book." So let's go with that chapter. And the other, when we wrote the book, we weren't writing the book to talk about fireproof coaching. We didn't have fireproof coaching. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't a concept. It wasn't a vision. And since the book came out in June, my phone and email has blown up, and we now have 15 fireproof law firms across the country. Incredible. That we are coaching and taking them through the fireproof model. And it's probably a chapter that we would have put in had we known it was a need. It's a lot of fun. I've carved off time, as John Nachazel has carved off time, to work with law firms and help them build their Jumbotron and help them with their hiring process, and help them with everything under the sun. And it's been really rewarding to see the fast growth, to see the appreciation and all that. It's just been great.
I got to imagine, the book, it's got to help with those peer-based referrals. Even if it's not intentional, it's got to help because you're just the thought leader. If an external firm reads your book and they say, well, he's got it down, I got to imagine that you're top of mind for those peer referrals too.
I don't know if that's, there's not a ton of cross-state referrals. They're one-offs, and there's not a ton of them. And that wasn't a point of writing the book or doing the coaching. And hopefully it happens. I refer out cases all the time to other people. We refer out over 100 a week because the phones and everything are crazy. But that would be nice. I'm open for referral.
Awesome. So let's switch back to kind of the visionary mindset here. So, anyone growing a firm needs to have some sort of direction they want to take in regards to a goal they want to achieve. And one of the things I've struggled with myself is, how do you set a 10-year goal? Like a 10 years from now? Is it like an advanced retrospective? What kind of goes into setting those really long-term type of goals?
So, couple interesting facts about that. I've never had a 10-year goal. 50% of the entrepreneurs who work in the EOS system don't have 10-year goals. And as a true visionary, our brains don't work that way. I never, when Gino first introduced it to me, I'm like, nope, I can't think 10 years out. I can barely think tomorrow. Even though I'm a visionary, I can think tomorrow, right? So what we do is we have 3-year goals, 1-year goals. And that works for us. And we update them every January. And it's shorter, it's easier, bites. And even the 3-year goal is a little bit, it's kind of like a BHAG, right? It's just kind of hanging out there. But the 1-year goal, to me, is the most important. 13 years in a row, we've hit it to the penny, basically, except for COVID 2020, which we're going to come off. We don't know the exact number, but we're going to be less than 10% off, which is a good thing. Shockingly, I would have guessed 50% off, but John Nachazel does such an amazing job with forecasting and predicting that he had it dialed in. And, it's just, I'm sure you guys talked about that on the podcast. It's a game changer that every business in America, especially law firms, have the ability, if you have the right data, to predict what you're going to earn, what the firm will bring in at the end of the year. And he's proven it time and time again. And it's a game changer. Just is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, it's funny when I go on a vacation or something, I come back and I've got a million ideas and my team's like, oh shit, Chris went on vacation, so in that 10-year, even for myself, I'm like, that seems pretty out there because I've got all these shiny objects floating around. But, one of the things, John, I really liked in your guys' book was, we self-implemented EOS, but how John and yourself tied your goals into year-to-date numbers and year-to-date actual, in addition to those weekly leading indicators, which I thought was incredibly smart. In fact, I think I took a picture on my phone and even said, like, we need to do this as well in terms of like those revenue targets and things like that. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so switching over to the marketing side, there's so many avenues of marketing. You've social media, traditional, on the ground, print, billboard, TV, vanity numbers. And I noticed, you've got 855 Mike Wins. First of all, is that a Paul Faust, a ring boost special? I
didn't know Paul back then, but Paul's a good friend. I recommend everybody get their vanity numbers from Paul. But this was just a whim. I was in Mexico with some friends and we came up with it. And the guy who I was with actually had connections, got me the number. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And it's been my number for since about 2011. And it's worked for me.
Yeah, and you utilize it really well. I mean, it's like cohesive across all your marketing initiatives. Speaking of some of those marketing methods, 80/20, big Pareto, big picture, what are some of the marketing initiatives you think personal injury law firms should be investing in today?
Well, of course, digital. That's I was just on a webinar and they did a survey to the people and, that's where people are putting their money. I think it was 1% were on TV. So that's really digital and PPC and the SEO, of course, and the good work that you do. But, I think social media, you can't get away with it. I don't know a law firm that doesn't have it. I know a lot of law firms who do it badly and who don't get it and don't try to be a little bit different. I mean, I don't want to, because I think so many people aren't on TV. I don't think, we could talk a lot about TV, of course, but taking the concepts that we talk about, the Cherry Garcia concept over vanilla and applying those to what you do, applying those to social media, I think is just as important. I mean, it's really, doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing. And being bold and taking risks and being funny and self-deprecating and bringing in your pets or your mom or your kids or whatever makes you different and unique. That's what people want to see. I mean, if you look at my best posts, it's not the ones of me saying, I'm going to fight for you and win, call me, right? It's the ones I was on an island with my daughters a few days ago. And my social media person said, it's National Ice Cream Day. Get me a picture with you and your kids eating ice cream. And I don't eat a ton of ice cream, but we like ice cream once in a while. And okay, so we had these little Haagen-Dazs cups and we took a goofy picture and my tongue's hanging out. It's like, And it's hundreds and hundreds of comments and shares and likes. And it was like, that's what people care about. That's what you and I care about when we're trolling the social media. And like so many law firms don't get it. And they just put up this boring shit that's never going to do anything for them. And so it's just taking risks and being different. And that's where people should, whatever they do, that's how they should do it, is be different.
I'm not going to lie. I had to Google the Cherry Garcia ice cream flavor because I'm not a big ice cream guy and I had to Google it. But yeah, it makes complete sense.
Try it next time you're in the market. Buy it. If you don't like it, I'll pay you back for it.
Okay, we'll do. The other thing that you mentioned, so a couple things on TV, and I don't want to focus too much here, but first you mentioned being unique, and it makes me think of like Jim Adler and the Hammer. And now there's hammers in every state and city, and now they're kind of common. They don't stand out as much. The other thing though is, do you think the TV play? One of the things, and I'm a digital guy, and I think most of the digital guys try to ostracize the other, talk smack about the other marketing initiatives. But the thing I like about it is because I could be watching cable and see an advertisement 4 times in the same day. If I'm watching, do you think that just recurring where they might see it multiple times in the same day has an effect? Why do you think still, even though Netflix and all these other streaming services out there, TV is still effective?
Good question. Well, I think I think it's going to become less and less effective every year. So that's a for sure. But and listen, I'm not a huge TV watcher, Chris, so I'm not a great person to ask that question to. But my phones are ringing, and it's daytime. It's people are watching daytime TV. I mean, the networks and the cable channels, they're not going away, and people are still watching, and it's still a popular medium, even though it's not for you and I. A lot of people who need lawyers are watching TV, and the ones who aren't, they're going to see your ad on a billboard, or they're going to see it on digital. And I think, and there's different audiences. I mean, you and me are seeing it on digital and billboards, but we're not seeing it on the TV. Right. The people who are sitting home all day watching TV may not be seeing it on digital or on the billboards. So you got to kind of be everywhere, which is not easy.
Yeah, that omnipresent. It makes me think, like the motorcycle people that niche down into motorcycles, where they're hanging out, they're going to those festivals, they're riding motorcycles themselves, and they do really well there because they're in that community, that group.
Yep.
Switching over to personal here. So, in the past, you've spoken about your father was a personal injury attorney and how that played, in your career choice. And now you have 3 daughters. Do you think one of them is going to follow in your footsteps? Would you like them to?
Well, 2 of them are in college. We have definitely had the law school conversation. I would love one of them to come over and take over the firm. But I'm going to leave it up to them. They're looking at social work and education, and they want to make this world a better place. They're amazing kids. And I don't know. I kind of hope so, because, I have so much fun and I have a great firm, and I'd love to be able to put it in the hands of somebody that I trust and love. But I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for them. So stay tuned.
Sounds good. And then we got a closing segment here. It's our 3 for 3. It's just, 3 questions, a quick hitter, 3 questions in 3 minutes. And I'll just start, and we've talked about this a lot, but number 1, what is your top law firm marketing tip?
Be different. Cherry Garcia over vanilla. Take some risks. Don't be like the terrible competitors in your market. Do something that's going to make people smile, and save your ad and share your ad. Bring your mom into the commercial. Bring your dog into the commercial. Bring your kids into the commercial. Do something different.
Love it.
That's it.
Love it. Which entrepreneur do you admire the most?
I guess I'm going to go with Elon Musk, because I own a couple Teslas and I love Tesla. And I think, I think he's a pretty cool guy, built a great company, built some great cars.
He definitely embodies the Cherry Garcia and the contrarian marketer.
Absolutely.
And then I got a curveball here. I had to pin something to this for you. So what book has had the biggest impact on your business besides anything traction related?
I would say, putting me on the spot, I read lots and lots and lots of business books. I'm going to go with Good to Great by Jim Collins. That's a long time ago, but I remember it. And it just solidified a lot of the things that I did. It taught me a lot about being a leader, and about the type of people I wanted, about who I wanted to become. And we were a good company. I read the book, and I think we became a great company. And I think that's a must read for anybody trying to run a law firm.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And Michael, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris.